course of history, and it changed, in some sense, the lives of, throughout history, the lives of millions and millions of people. And today we'll hear some of those stories. And perhaps, today, it will be a day in which, as you hear about this, it will change your perspective and perhaps your life as well. Jesus as a historical figure, no one argues against that Jesus existed. He's a historical figure. What people might argue about is that Jesus, the claims that he made while he was here on earth were the truth. And the fact that, the Bible tells us that he rose from the dead on Easter Sunday, is that true? So that's what people might argue about. Did Jesus really rise from the dead? Is it, or the claims that he made were they for real? For me, growing up, I didn't believe so. I grew up in a Christian home, but I didn't believe. In fact, I ran away from the church. My parents forced us to go to church every Sunday. And I remember growing up, in the beginning you go for fun as a kid, you don't know any better. But as I started having my own thoughts, I'm like, why do my parents force me to go to church every Sunday? I don't want to go. I'd rather be out there playing soccer with my friends. And so one Sunday I did skip church, and my dad found out. And I'm not going to tell you what happened, but ever since then, I didn't skip church again for fear. You can imagine what happened. But I resented that. I really resented that. So I'm like, I don't believe in the claims that Jesus made. Grew up in school, atheism was the norm, right? Creationism, no way, it's Big Bang Theory all the way. And so I didn't believe it. And if you think about it, Jesus made some extraordinary claims. In one passage that we're going to read together, in fact, let me show it to you. He said, I am the door. I am the door. He who enters through me will be saved. He will go in and out and find pasture. The thief, his only goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus said, I am here. I came to give life, and not just life, life eternal, life abundant. And he said, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. See, here Jesus made at least 6 very bold claims. He said, no, I am the door to salvation. And if you want to be saved in this life, you have to go through me. He also claimed that he is the door through which we can experience freedom. He says, no, you go in and out, right? Oftentimes we go in, we can't get out. That's what happens in this world. I see so many people, so many young adults who get into things and they're not able to get out. They get into addiction. They get into porn. They get into gaming. I mean, that's a sensitive topic. There's a lot of people games and but some people get into gaming, they can't get out. They get into drugs. I see so many people get into depression and they're not able to get out. I see some people smiling about the gaming comment. I hear you. I was never there. I was never into games, but my son-in-law was, and he still is, and nothing wrong with it. But what I'm talking about was when people get into things. I know Andy's looking around, who, me? But no, I see people get into things, and I'm not bashing gaming, okay? I am here to talk about the certain things, and it's true, there's certain things that people get into and they can't get out. But Jesus says, I am the door through which you can go in and out in total freedom. I provide freedom. That's the claim he made, and that's a really, really bold claim. The third claim he made here is that you will go in and out and find pasture. So he's the door to fulfillment. To fulfillment. Jesus was into the whole health. Today everybody talks about eggs from chicken were raised in pasture. Cows raised in pasture. Jesus talked about pasture, and he wasn't even thinking about that. So he was into organics even before we were. But what he was talking about is, you come through me, you will find pasture, you will find nourishment, you will find fulfillment. The fourth claim he made was, he says, I came to give life. And not just life, but life abundantly. And fifth claim, he says, that he is the good shepherd who lays down his life for us. And Easter, or Good Friday, is exactly what he did on Friday. He was crucified. He gave his life for his sheep. And on Sunday, he rose from the dead. And the last claim he made is that there is a thief that's out there. Okay? There's a thief that's out there whose primary goal, his only goal, is to steal and kill and destroy. No wonder we have so much brokenness in this world. No wonder there's so much hurt and pain. And he's not just talking about a person, he's talking, because the Bible talks about an enemy that we all have. A spiritual forces, dark forces in the spiritual realm. That's our true enemy. And his goal is to kill, steal, and destroy. We call him Satan, we call him the devil, demons. You may not believe it, but it's real. And Jesus claims that there is this real enemy whose goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. So, growing up in Paris, I didn't believe any of those claims. I thought, this is just what my parents believe. And I couldn't wait to leave home. And so, I did. I grew up in France, in Paris. When I was 17, there was an opportunity for me to leave my family to go study in New York. And so I took that, and I remember the day I left, I thought to myself, I'll never have to go to church ever again. And that's my story, right? That's a picture of me when I was 17. I still had a lot of hair. I looked at it this week and man, I look like a kid. And I guess I was just a kid at 17. It's just a kid. But I left my family at tender age of 17, thinking I'll never go to church ever again. But what's funny is that as soon as I landed in New York, I started going to church every Sunday on my own. And in a way, I guess, when you're away from your family for the first time, you're by yourself, you start reflecting upon your own life, right? What is life all about? What am I doing here? I started thinking about my family, my parents. Why does my father love God so much? And not just my father, it started with my grandfather. I have some family pictures here. Very old pictures. No, this is my grandfather whom I've never met. Okay, he passed away in his 60s in China, and I've never met him. This is my dad. He was so skinny. This is my mom, my dad, my three older siblings. I actually have two older sisters, even older, that they had left them in China. So these three were born in Hong Kong, and then I was the last one born in Hong Kong. As soon as I was born, they moved to France, and then in France they had two more daughters. So I have two younger sisters, altogether 8 of us. That's a lot of kids. And this is my dad today at 96. Okay, so if you have all the kids together, the grandkids, great-grandkids, and the spouses, all the spouses, there are over 100 of us. And I find myself going back almost every year to do a wedding. either my niece, my nephew, and now soon my great nephew might be getting married next year in a few years. So big family. And so, but anyway, going back to when I was in New York, first moving to New York, thinking about my parents, my grandfather, why do they love God so much? And I remember stories that my father told about how he was saved as a baby. He was born in China, in Shanghai, in fact. And in the village, small village, there were 7 other babies who were born around the same time who contracted a virus, a deadly virus, and they were all condemned to die. All the doctors said there's no hope. My grandfather, who was not a Christian then, heard from an aunt who heard that there was this God who could heal. And my aunt said, perhaps if you pray to this God, your son will be spared. And so my grandfather prayed to this God, and all other 7 kids died except for my father. So that's when his spiritual journey began. And throughout the course of my father's life, God saved his life more than once. He saved my grandfather's life, for real, at least one time when he was dying and he couldn't eat and drink, and everybody was saying, he's going to die. And he was, I think, in his 40s. And even one relative came and said, no, forget worshiping this God. Go and worship some idols. But he refused. And that night, as he was lying there, dying, an angel came, applying some pressure on the side of his mouth with a feather. And he woke up and said, that felt really good, can you do the other side? And so the angel did. And then he woke up for good, and he called his wife, my grandmother, and said, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, give me some water to drink. And he hadn't drank for days, he hadn't eaten for anything for days. So she gave him some water, he drank it, he says, I'm hungry. So she cooked him some congee, and he ate it, he says, I'm still hungry. And then he lived for another 20 years after that. Miracle. My dad experienced miracles in his life. Today he's 96. And recently my mom said, your dad is saying to us that perhaps God is calling him home. And I'm thinking, well, maybe, because that's exactly how my grandfather went home, went to heaven. One day he woke up, he was, I think, 67. He woke up and he told his family, he put on his new clothes, went to visit every one of his relatives, his family. He said, God is calling me home tonight. Nobody believed him. But he did his tour, visited all his relatives. That night he went to sleep and never woke up, or at least he woke up in heaven. And that's how he went. And my dad recently has been saying, I think God is calling me home. So I was thinking about all these stories my father told, and I was wondering, could it be that the claims Jesus made be true? So I started searching. I started going to church on my own. I started reading the Bible on my own. I started listening to sermons from the preacher on Sundays. And a year later, I made a decision. I believe. I'm going to commit my life to Jesus, and I'm going to follow him. And I'm going to tell you, my life completely changed from that day on. Transformation upon transformation. I didn't become perfect, and I'm still not perfect, but I experienced so much changes in my life. Around that time, I also met my wife, Amy, at church. She was the pastor's daughter, and pastor's daughters don't date, by the way. So we never dated, but we knew each other for about 7 years when we got married. This is it. I know, I had to dig those pictures out, and some of you have never seen it, and man, I was so skinny. We were so young. So we got married and we lived happily ever after, right? No. No. We were so immature, especially my wife. Now you know who the real immature one is. But, the enemy that Jesus talked about, the claim he made about this enemy who's here to steal and kill and destroy, he is real. And we experienced it. We had so much struggle in our marriage. first 5 years, we almost didn't make it. I mean, we both grew up in church, pastor's daughter, but we were ready to quit because there was so much hurt in our marriage. And you know, when you're hurt, that's when the lies come in. That's what the enemy uses. He uses the hurt to introduce lies. And we were believing in those lies about each other, about marriage. And we were ready to quit. But by the grace of God, the power of God is real as well. Because we didn't. And we decided we're going to stick through it and we're going to seek help. You know, we're going to grow through it. We started praying together. We humbled each other. God kept changing us, transforming us, and we kept growing and growing. And around that time, we were also pursuing, in some ways, the American dream. You know, the American dream is have double income, right? Have cars and houses, and we were having kids. So, you know, after getting married, we started having kids. We had an investment property in New York, and our dream home in New Jersey with a swimming pool in the backyard, and we were pursuing the American dream. I was working for IBM Research. I was there for 14 years. Amy was an attorney. She was working for the as a prosecutor in the Bronx in New York. And to a certain degree, you know, we reached the American dream. But we felt like, you know, is that all there is? Something is still missing. Where is the abundant life that Jesus was talking about? You know, because Jesus said, I came to give you life, and we felt like we have life, but not just life, but life abundant. And we were yearning for that. And so as we were seeking and praying and asking God for that, God clearly led us to eventually, you know, gradual. I mean, we made one decision after another, and a series of miracles in our lives, where we both ended up quitting our jobs. Okay. I mean, I quit a great job at IBM. Nobody quits IBM. People enter IBM, it's like you're an IBMer for life. Because IBM at that time doesn't fire people. You're there in job security, you know. But I quit my job. My coworkers didn't understand. My manager didn't understand. But I felt like, no, God wanted me to quit my job, finish seminary, and go into ministry. So we both quit our jobs. And by 2003, we sold our investment property in New York City. We sold our home in New Jersey. We sold our cars, and we ended up in China for the first time. On January 1st, we landed in China because we wanted to experience God. We wanted to experience the abundant life that Jesus was talking about. We wanted to continue to grow and be transformed by His power. And so that's what we did. This is us at the airport landing in China with 3 young kids in 2003, January 1st. Not knowing what we were supposed to do, but God led us to start the bridge in China. And here you're here at the bridge in Houston, but we started the bridge in China, and very quickly God brought all these young adults to us. Hundreds. Over the course of close to 20 years, we've seen tens of thousands of young adults come through our home initially. Okay? They were in our courtyard, wanting to improve their English, wanting to learn English. But inevitably, I will tell them about this Jesus who changes and transforms lives. And many of them came to receive Jesus as well. Hundreds of them did. And each one of them with amazing stories of transformation. Truly. I have hundreds of stories I can tell you. But today I'm just going to tell you one story. And I picked that one story because he happened to write to Amy this past week, thanking her for all the investment we've made into his life, okay, and all the changes that he's been experiencing. His name is Jim. Okay, and Jim came to us, I forget which year, but he came to us like most of the young adults because he wanted to improve his English. His English was actually pretty good already. But he wanted to improve his English, so he came, and as he sat there, that week it happened to be someone who shared her story about how she was struggling with depression. and how she has not been able to sleep for months. Until one day when she accepted Christ, the insomnia all of a sudden was gone. So she shared her story, and Jim, as he was sitting there, he himself has not been sleeping for months. He couldn't sleep. And he said, if what she's saying is true, I want it. So after the service, he went to talk to her. She shared with him about Jesus. He accepted Jesus in his heart. He believed and trusted in him. And that night, he slept for the first time in a long time. But that was only the beginning of his transformation. Because I remember meeting Jim for the first time. I mean, it was more than just sleep he needed. He really needed a lot of changes because, first of all, he never made any eye contact with me. And when people are struggling with internal stuff, sometimes it shows up on your face. And in the case of Jim, it was true. He had all these facial tics, okay? He couldn't control it, and he was blink his eyes constantly. And he had a really strong stutter. I barely could understand what he was saying. I had him repeat some of the things he had to say. So he had all these symptoms. He never made eye contact with me, and I'm like, oh man, he really needs a lot of help and a lot of change in his life. And what happened was, prior to coming to the bridge in China, Jim had been living a life of crime. After college, his parents encouraged him to, instead of like most young adults, parents say, go find a good job. His parents were involved in a gang of crooks, scammers, okay? And so he told Jim, if you want to make money, join us. And that's what Jim did. He joined the gang, and they sent him to Thailand, and he was working out of a building in Thailand with hundreds of other scammers on the phone, calling into China, scamming people out of their money. That's the life he was living. One day, the police raided the building, arrested tons of people, but Jim and 30 other of his coworkers, or I don't know if you call it coworkers, but scammers, escaped, and they hid in a hotel room. One hotel room, 30 people crammed in it. And they were in that room for about 2 weeks. They were hiding, they couldn't get out, they were afraid that the police will catch them. They had takeout being delivered, and one bathroom for 30 people. They slept on the floor. Jim happened to be sitting next to one of the nightstands, and like in most hotels, in the nightstand was a Bible. So Jim opened the drawer and he found the Bible. He didn't know what it was. He started reading it for the first time. He didn't understand what he was reading, but his English actually was pretty good enough to read an English Bible. He didn't think much of it. After about 2 weeks, they managed to smuggle them back into China, and he happens to land in our city, and he ended up at the bridge. Coincidence? I don't think so. And that day when when I met him for the first time, like I said, that was also the first day, night, evening where he slept for a long time. And he started growing through the bridge. He started taking through classes. He started attending small groups and so forth. And then during COVID, we all lost touch. We were stuck here in Houston. Right after COVID, I haven't seen Jim for years. We went back to China for the first time after COVID. I forget, 2022, I think, something like that. And I made an appointment with Jim to go out to lunch because I had heard he just got married. And so we met up at the restaurant. I had a gift for him. And I was shocked at the transformation in his life. Go back a little bit. While we were still living in China, I believe it was one Easter Sunday, I was preaching on forgiveness and how God was calling us to forgive because He has forgiven us. During the Song of Response, Jim was at a corner on his knees, and he was weeping. Weeping. Amy saw him, went over, put her hands on his shoulder and started praying for him. Afterward, he told Amy, he said, you know, I haven't seen my parents for 2 years. I blacklisted them from my phone, from my contact, from my social media, and I have so much hatred and resentment towards them for introducing me into this life of crime. He hated his parents, and he hasn't spoken to them for 2 years. But on that day, on Easter Sunday, he was convicted, and he said, I must forgive my parents. I want to forgive my parents. So after we were done on Sunday, he went home and bought tickets, train tickets. His parents were not in the same city. He bought train tickets to go back to his hometown. And he went to see his parents, forgave them, and shared with them this Jesus who had changed them. So that was Jim. Those are his parents. And then during COVID, he got married. This is his wife. And when I saw him right after COVID at the restaurant, I'm like, whoa, what happened to you? His face was completely changed. Gone were the tics. Gone were the blinking of the eyes, incessant blinking that he couldn't control. Gone was the stutter. And he spoke with confidence. I said, Jim, what happened to you? What happened to you? He said, God has been changing me. And during that time, not only did I get married, Jim was living in constant fear of the police catching up to him. Every time his phone rang, he would jump. And he said, during COVID, the police did catch up to me. They called me. And they said to me, we know everything about you, Jim. We're not going to arrest you. Your record is now clear. Just don't go back to this gang. And don't ever do the things you used to do. It was a miracle. He was set free. And so on that day at the restaurant, he told me, he said, I feel so free. God has been changing me and transforming me. And that's the transformation power of Easter. Like I said, Jim's story is just one of hundreds of stories I can tell you. And some of those stories are even more dramatic. If you think Jim's story is dramatic, there are stories that are even more dramatic. How powerful God is. The resurrection power. And today I want you to hear one more story, and that is the story of Scott. Scott is getting baptized, and I've asked him to share his story. I gave him only 5 to 10 minutes, right? So let's invite Scott up here.
There's a lot of people here. First, I want to thank everyone for coming. Some of you have come from far and wide. Some from Maryland, one from Tomball, Tucson, Arizona, in the middle of nowhere. Welcome to my side of town. So you know I grew up here? I grew up here in Chinatown. And I went to Ed White Elementary School, just 2 miles that way. And as you can imagine, based on the area, I was in a very great school. Quality of education was pretty low. And as a result of that, I wasn't very prepared for middle school. Not only was I a pretty bad student, but the school I ended up going to was T.H. Rogers. And for those that don't know, T.H. Rogers is one of the best public middle schools in New York. The complete other side of the spectrum. And because of that, I stuck out a lot. Even though I was surrounded by a bunch of Asian kids, by the time the report cards came out, Everyone was getting all A's, while I was struggling to pass. And that did something to me. Even though I turned it around, even though I ended up getting higher grades later, even though I got into UT Austin, which is not that bad of a school, even though I did all those things, I still had a feeling of low self-esteem because I thought I wasn't smart. I had very little confidence in myself. So what did I do? I coped. I compensated by trying to improve my self-image to the point where I cared a lot, almost too much about how I appeared to other people, how I looked, to the point where I even started dressing in business casual.
Like now?
Like now. Because I thought it would help me feel better about myself. Because I thought it would help me be more acceptable to others. Not to mention that the layering helps hide exactly how skinny I am, because I was so anxious about my body. And at times I even envied those that had the kind of body I wished I had. I was a mental wreck. But then something happened. Something happened in my last year of college. A good friend of mine, he's right here by the way. A good friend of mine introduced me to Jesus. And after learning a little more about him, I decided to trust Jesus. And that's when my life started to change. That was my last year, so I very quickly graduated. And when I came back home to Houston, I started looking for a church. And after a few months, I found myself at Church of Bridge. And I want to take this time to thank everyone here at the Bridge, my church, my community. You've all done so much to get me here today, where I am today. It was through the Bridge that I eventually learned that my worth doesn't come from what people think of me, or how successful I am, how strong I am, or if I'm liked. No, I eventually learned that my identity is found in being a child of God. And that's changed the way that I see myself. Sure, I still care about how I dress and how I present myself, but I do it now because I genuinely enjoy it, not because I'm seeking approval. I don't measure my success by whether I'm liked, how much money I make, how much weight I can throw around the gym, or what people think about me. No, I measure success. It's not conditional on any of those things. I measure success in a much more different way now. Or in a way I don't measure it at all, because I'm already loved. I'm already valued and already redeemed by God. And I'm still growing. 100% I'm still growing. But looking back, I can definitely see how Christ has transformed my life. And perhaps the best evidence of that transformation is the fact that I'm here standing before you today, telling you my story. Because back then I would have never been able to do that. My self-confidence was so low, my sense of self-esteem was so low. God has given me a deeper peace, a greater sense of identity, more humility, and a heart that is learning to love, a heart that is learning to trust and forgive. And I would love to go on, but I'm running out of time.
You're doing great.
The point is, my life is not perfect, but it is different. It has changed for the better because Jesus is in it. And I'm grateful that He continues to change me every day. Thank you.
And after hearing Scott's story and Jim's story and perhaps even my own story, I don't know what you're thinking and what you're feeling. Perhaps some of you are thinking, hey, I wouldn't mind changing. I wouldn't mind experiencing transformation. I mean, do you? Do you want to experience transformation? Perhaps some of you are thinking, is there something more to life than this? And I know a lot of people ask that question. I've had many. Some of you, you're too young to ask that question. Okay, you have your whole life ahead of you. But as you age, that is a question that oftentimes might come to mind. Am I settling for something that's not the best? Right? Is there more to life? Am I settling? Are you asking that question? Perhaps you are. Let me tell you, don't settle. Don't settle. There is something better. It's like me and my relationship with shrimps, okay? I love shrimps. But, seriously, growing up in Paris, my parents, I don't know why, but the only type of shrimps I have ever eaten were frozen, pre-cooked shrimps. And my parents owned a restaurant, by the way. But and they served shrimps to their customers, but when we ate shrimps, it was just the pre-cooked frozen shrimps. And they'll defrost it, and during holidays, we'll have shrimps. It was pretty good. That's when my love for shrimps first began. And then I moved to New York, and I remember going to the market. It's like, fresh shrimps. and that's when I tasted fresh shrimps. And go to the restaurants, like, wow, that's even better. And then when I moved to China, for the first time, I saw live shrimps jumping around. They're still alive. I even ate sashimi, live shrimps, like barely dead and like eating raw. It's like so sweet. I know it sounds cruel, but it was so sweet. The live shrimps, and when you cook it, it's like the skin just comes right off. It was so good, so good. My eyes were open. After that, when I went back to Paris, my mom took out, even though they were the largest shrimp I've ever saw, it just didn't cook it. It just didn't cut it. They were pre-cooked frozen shrimps. Don't settle for frozen pre-cooked shrimps. When there's live shrimp waiting for you. Jesus said, I have come to give you life. And not just life, but life abundant. Don't let the thief come and steal and kill and destroy your life. I am the door, he says. He who enters through me will be saved. He will come in and out in freedom and find pasture. Because I am the good shepherd. And the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. That's who Jesus is. Would you pray with me?